Okay. Okay. Good evening, Minister Lakkotrypis, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, lawmakers from the European Parliament. My name is Daniel Schwammenthal. I'm the director of the American Jewish Committee's EU office here in Brussels, the Transatlantic Institute. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here. Apologies for the delay. Our speakers were stuck in typical Brussels traffic. I would like to first of all recognize the members of my board here and the chairmanship of John Shapiro, who have come here all the way from the United States to be with us here tonight and for a series of meetings with EU officials, members of the European Parliament, as our part of our enduring commitment to the transatlantic relationship and to the EU project. So really welcome to all of you specifically. Thank you for being with us here. The trilateral partnership between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel took just a little bit more than 2,000 years to become a reality. But now that it is here, it is really an anchor of stability in a very troublesome region. And this cooperation goes far beyond just gas exploration, as important as it is, and potentially also for European energy security. We really hope that it could become also a nucleus for cooperation among other states, countries in the regions, Arab states in the regions. Egypt is a very good candidate, and we have here the DCM of the Egyptian embassy here. Welcome. And who knows, one day, inshallah, in a post-Hezbollah Lebanon, also with this country. But for now, I have the great pleasure to hand it over to my friend, Dr. Markus Ehm, our partner here from the Hanns Seidel Foundation, to welcome you. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you. It is a big privilege for us to welcome Georgios Lakkotrypis, Minister for Energy, Commerce and Industry of the Republic of Cyprus, and it gives us a feeling of proudness that you are with us tonight. We are very much interested in receiving profound background information and the latest insights in what is currently happening in the Eastern Mediterranean. Let me underline how important it is that a small EU member state like the Republic of Cyprus takes use of the opportunity to share its views with political decision makers and other high-ranking officials of the European Union in Brussels, in the center, in the heart of Europe. And this is exactly what the EU is about. Each country, how small or big it may be, is very much welcome to present its perspective on whatsoever political topic. We are more than happy to provide you with a platform for such a presentation. Welcome to Brussels, dear Minister. And we do this together with our friends of the American Jewish Committee, a long-standing partner of the Hanns Seidel Stiftung. We are very pleased that David Harris, as the CEO, is with us tonight and shares his opinion as one of the appreciated panelists with all of us. Let me say thank you for this trustful and reliable cooperation. And as already said, Christian Schmidt, our deputy chair of the foundation, passes his best regards to you. He's very sorry that he cannot be with us tonight. And of course, let me include into my words of gratitude Daniel Schwammenthal, with whom and his team we prepared this conference. It was fun, and we are very much looking forward to learning more details on the content as given in the headlines. Last but not least, a warm welcome goes to Gina Cohen, who is an energy consultant and lecturer at Technion University in Israel. We are delighted to have such a distinguished expert with us tonight. And It is really remarkable how many articles you published on the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean and how profoundly you worked on this topic. Thank you very much for coming to Brussels. It was a very long way from Israel to the center of the European Union. Thank you very much. And of course, next to you is sitting Roland Freudenstein from the Martens Center, and he is not to be forgotten. He is the moderator of our today's panel. Roland, thank you very much for your input. Thank you. Dear honorable members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the European Parliament, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the AJC and the Hanns Seidel Foundation. We are pleased to have you all tonight at the De Veranda Club in order to discuss the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. It's a region we usually link to beaches, to warm white sand, to sunny weather. This is where thousands of exhausted people from the European continent lingering for relaxation spend their holidays. And having this in mind, one could not imagine that there are developments ongoing that give reason to worry. It was 8 years ago when US-American engineers declared that they have found natural gas resources close to the Republic of Cyprus in the so-called Aphrodite field. Since then, even more natural gas resources have been discovered. That meant and means economic opportunities, of course, and these circumstances lead to the situation that is becoming more and more critical. Turkey claims to have the right on its side, and has even blocked a Cypriotic ship that was about to explore the ground of the sea last year in 2008. After that, Turkey even sent 2 ships, what made the EU think about sanctions against Ankara in July of the current year. Parties of this dispute are Turkey on the one side and a coalition already mentioned today of Cyprus, Greece and Israel on the other. I am very much looking forward to learning more about the situation around the mentioned resources of natural gas in Eastern Mediterranean and the coalition of Cyprus, Greece and Israel that, as we also have heard tonight, that goes far beyond the project of extracting gas and building a pipeline to Europe. The coalition seeks to strengthen common democratic values as a core element of regional cooperation. Dear Minister, thank you very much once again to share your thoughts with us. We are pleased, we are delighted to have you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus, for the kind words. The honor is truly mine for having the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. Excellencies, ambassadors, distinguished guests, dear David, dear John, for those of you who've traveled from afar, dear Marcus, dear Daniel, let me start by thanking the Hanns Seidel Foundation and the American Jewish Committee for the honor of addressing the audience today. And I'll take it from where Marcus left it. He mentioned that it took us 2,000 years to get here, right? In geological terms, because hydrocarbons were formed 40 or 50 million years ago, that's just a second away. So better late than never. And as one example of what has happened in the Eastern Med because of the oil and gas industry is that we got us together here today. I very much doubt that we would be having this conversation had it not been for the events that happened since 2009 at the Tamar field. So let me give a very brief introduction about what is happening, because I really look forward to the conversation. It would take me about 10-15 minutes. So what is the opportunity? The opportunity here has been predicted by the US Geological Survey. In 2010, the US Geological Survey predicted that in the Levantine Basin, which is basically, if you look at the map, Cyprus and Israel on the east of Cyprus and Israel, holds about 122 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. It also predicted that in the Nile Delta Basin, which is basically the area west of Israel and Cyprus, the area holds about 223 trillion cubic feet. And some of these numbers are actually being proven over the years, because discoveries of natural gas in the Eastern Med is nothing new. It has been happening outside the Nile Delta since the 50s and 60s, right? It's just the Tamar discovery in Israel in 2009 showed that the sediments from the Nile Delta Basin actually migrated as north as they did. And since 2009 has been the new play, if I could call it this way. We had the Tamar discovery in Israel, we had the Leviathan discovery in Israel, the Aphrodite discovery in Cyprus, we had the Zohr discovery in Egypt, again a new geological play. We had the Calypso discovery in Cyprus and the Glavkus discovery in Cyprus. So just to put the numbers into perspective, let me tell you that since 2009, Tamar discovery, there have been about 2,100 billion cubic meters of natural gas discovered among the three countries, Israel, Cyprus, and Egypt. And again, to put that into perspective, Europe in 2018 consumed about 450 BCM. So you can easily see how the numbers are adding up, exactly to position the Eastern Med as a region as an alternative source of supply and routes of natural gas to the European Union. Yes, a lot of those quantities discovered will be used regionally, right, to cover the security of supply for the countries. For example, the Tamar and Leviathan fields are already producing. Tamar is producing, Leviathan will be producing soon to feed the Israeli market. Zohr is producing to feed the Egyptian market because there's a really high demand there. The Aphrodite field will be producing soon, and that will be mostly shipped to the Egyptian LNG terminal for export, but potentially a small part of that would also cover the domestic market of Cyprus. So you can see even today with all of this production and the discoveries, and there is still more to come, we have about, between the two countries, Israel and Cyprus, there's about 400 BCM of natural gas to be exported. And a lot of discussions have happened in the past and still going on. What are the optimal ways of exporting, of monetizing that gas? And as it was mentioned before, the Eastern Med is not an easy region. It's a geopolitically challenging region, not to mention the technical difficulties of drilling in ultra-deep waters. So some of these discoveries are between 4,500 to 5,000 meters in depth. So you need super crucial expertise in order to get there and extract the gas, expensive. And not to mention also the commercial challenges which exist in a low-price oil environment as the one that we are going through today. So in order for the Eastern Med as a region, and this is what has been amazing for the Eastern Med, to surmount some of those challenges, we created, the countries created the East Med Gas Forum, which not only the tripartite between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel, which initiated everything, right? But to add to that Egypt, to add to that Jordan, to add to that Italy, to add to that Palestine as well. So here you have 7 entities, 7 countries who could be consumers, who could be producers, who could be transit countries, working together to resolve any potential differences that we have, right, on the technical level, to discuss technical solutions. How do we transport the gas to the European markets? And more fundamentally, perhaps, how do we make the East Med gas competitive in the global markets? We're not alone here. Russian gas has been producing for years. It's dominating the European markets. US is shipping LNG in an ever-increasing number. So the countries came together to find ways how to make the gas of the Eastern Med more competitive. And the initial path that we have selected is that we will sit down and actually utilize the existing infrastructure that we have today already built. I mentioned at the beginning of my speech that Egypt has been producing gas for decades now, right? So they've got a lot of infrastructure in place, which has been sitting idle. This is why you're seeing the Leviathan partners now selling gas to Egypt using the EMG pipeline through the Sinai, which has been dormant for many, many years for security reasons. So there's been enough security assurances, apparently, that would enable to make that project commercially viable. You're seeing Cyprus now, and we signed off the first phase of the agreement a couple of weeks ago. You see Cyprus agreeing to send the Aphrodite gas to Itku, the LNG plant in Egypt. That will be liquefied. It will be sent by pipeline, liquefy, and then from there, in a liquid form, send it to the European markets, which is the ones that Shell is primarily serving. So here you have a first example of of the creation of what we call the East Med gas corridor to the European Union. So imagine a cargo of liquefied natural gas leaving Egypt, the Egyptian LNG terminals, going to Greece, Revithousa, who has a receiving terminal, a regasification terminal, or in Alexandroupolis, one is under construction now, or indeed Croatia, for that matter, which is also building one, regasifying the gas and supplying into the European grid. This is what we call the corridor. And it implies a number of solutions. A lot of talk has happened over the years about the East Med pipeline. A lot of talk has happened about an LNG plant in Cyprus. Greenfield projects, challenging projects and ambitious projects, I have to admit. But at the same time, as countries, we have to be ready for future discoveries. Already Cyprus has Lafkos and Calypso. We will be appraising very soon both discoveries. We will be looking for ways of how to ship the gas. And certainly any of these solutions, if you combine the fields with maybe neighboring countries such as Israel and Egypt, we could be finding common solutions. So what we have said, first and foremost, let's utilize whatever infrastructure we have now to make our gas competitive. Let's look at greenfield projects for existing and future discoveries that haven't yet found their way to the market. And the moment hasn't come for us to choose. We are maturing all solutions simultaneously, East Med gas pipeline and the LNG terminal, even floating LNG, in order for us to be ready when the time comes to make the right choice. So as you can see with the example of the East Med Gas Forum, the countries are coming together exactly to achieve their common goals. Stability. You're having conversations that could not have been imaginable because of the traditional rivalries between the countries could not have been imagined just a few years ago, with one exception, two exceptions. One is Lebanon, of course, with the known issues that Lebanon has. It has been invited, right? But certain influences did not allow it for the time being to participate in the East Med Gas Forum. And Turkey. And I couldn't complete my introduction without having a specific mention about what is going on with Turkey. Because the region is not only about opportunities, I've described them very clearly, right? It's also about challenges. And certainly, the East Med Gas Forum has not been created to isolate anyone, right? On the contrary, it has been announced many times over and over again that any country is welcome to participate as long, of course, as it commits to international law, right? As long as it commits to respect international law. We have not been seeing that with Turkey. And it's not by coincidence that its relationships are strained, not just with Cyprus, but with almost anyone who participates on the East Med Gas Forum. And very briefly, let me say not just what it means for Cyprus, but also what it means for the region at large, right? Because Turkish claims, abstract claims, with a very weird interpretation of international law, don't affect just Cyprus. For example, if we accept the Turkish version of the Cyprus EEZ, we will be left with 31% of what we have today. All of our discoveries will be falling into different countries. All of the discoveries. So the pretext of protecting the rights of Turkish Cypriots is, excuse my French, mambo jumbo. Right? How do you protect the rights of Turkish Cypriots if you take away 69% of their EZ as well at the end of the day, right? So, But fundamentally for the region, let me also give another perspective which hasn't been very well known. If we accept the Turkish version of an EZ, it means that the southeastern Mediterranean basin becomes a Turkish lake. Let's take the EastMed pipeline, for example. If we accept the version of Turkey in terms of the EZ, it means that if the moment comes that we have to lay that pipeline, we will have to go and ask for permission from Turkish authorities. Do you realize what kind of power that would be? And of course, Turkey is the only one who stands alone on this. Very recently, just a few days ago, they signed an MOU with Libya about the intention of delimiting. Now imagine the map for a minute and think, where is Turkey and where is Libya? How can they have common sea borders? Because they ignore completely Crete and the fact that Crete has an exclusive economic zone, exactly because they do not respect, or actually they do not agree with the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea. They haven't ratified it, they haven't signed it, but neither has the US, by the way. And yet, the US respects the provisions of the UNCLOS. Let's take, for example, US and Cuba. Cuba is an island, much smaller, less coast than much smaller coast, and still, even though the agreement has not been ratified, US respects the UNCLOS provisions. I'll close it off here so we can actually go into the discussion. And to say that indeed, as the organizers have mentioned in their introduction, the Eastern Med provides both opportunities and challenges. Opportunities not only for countries that have traditionally not been talking to each other or have had animosity to come together to find common solutions, common prospects for their people, for their energy security, for their prosperity, but also for the commercial prosperity of each of these countries, and for advancing the cause of the Eastern Med. We have challenges as well, and I've outlined just a few of them now. But what I can firmly say is that the East Med Gas Forum, the countries I have mentioned, with the core pillar of Israel, Cyprus, and Greece, right, are committed to resolving them in a fashion which is appropriate to true democracies and liberal democracies and rule of law. So, with that, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the conversation.
We need some reshuffle.
How shall we?
They're going to come in.
Thank you.
So after, yeah. Okay. Can we? Is it working? All right. Well, sorry about this short intermezzo, I think, but that gave you time to prepare your questions. But before we go into questions and answers, I'd like to give our panelists, or actually two of them, the possibility to comment the minister's remarks. So I'm Roland Freudenstein from the Wilfried Martens Center, which is the foundation of the European People's Party. And the other panelists have already been properly introduced. So all that's left to me is the role of the bad cop, meaning the guy who limits the speaking time. So I'll happily do that. And I would like to start with David Harris. Asking you, well, we've been talking about 4 angles to the developments in the energy questions in the Eastern Mediterranean. This was values, geopolitics, economics, and technical questions. And I would like to maybe refer to the 2 first points first, the values and the geopolitics. What, in your view, have been the decisive changes over the last couple of years?
So first of all, good evening to everyone, and thank you to our friends at the Hanns Seidel Foundation for joining with the American Jewish Committee and our Brussels office, and thank you all for being here. In a way, I may be one of the historians on the panel because I don't remember all 2,000 years, though my children probably think I do. But I was witness to the last 40 years. And I want to share with you how this evolved as one of the participants in the story. In the 1980s, the relations among Greece, Cyprus, and Israel were at best chilly. So much so that Greece, together with Spain, was the last West European nation to extend full de jure diplomatic relations to Israel, which did not actually come about until Prime Minister Mitsotakis, the father, in 1990. Instead, the Greek foreign policy in the 1980s was largely oriented actually toward the Soviet bloc and towards certain Arab countries, including Libya, Syria, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and so forth. In the case of Cyprus, Cyprus saw itself as a key player in the Group of 77, or the non-aligned movement, however you wish to call it. And deep relations with Israel did not fit into that worldview. This began to change in 1990-91. We at AJC in the 1980s thought that this awkward triangle was a huge mistake on the part of the 3 nations. We, with our Hellenic American friends, people like Senator Paul Sarbanes, Congressman John Bradamus on the Greek side, and AJC members, saw the common values. We also saw the commonalities of friendship in the United States between Hellenic Americans and Jews. And we set out together in the 3 capitals to try and begin to help reorient the process, which was on autopilot, emphasizing both common values, anchored democracies in the Eastern Mediterranean, and common interests. To be fair, at the time, it was difficult, and not just in Greece and Cyprus, but in Israel, which was largely focused on Turkey. And to the extent that it saw geopolitically this as a zero-sum game, it made it even more difficult. That evolved. I won't go through the ensuing 30 years, but it evolved to the point where we heard from the minister this relationship. But I want to go a step further, Roland, in my comment. And I speak not as a geologist, I'm not, but as someone who observes the geopolitics of this. And I want to say this especially because we're sitting here in Brussels. I think what we're potentially seeing, and maybe it sounds ambitious, to some it may even sound a bit odd, is possibly a replication of the coal and steel community of the early 1950s. I'll put it this way, at least. Just as we seemed out of tune in the 1980s when we talked about this strategic triangle, if I'm seen as out of tune in 2019 by referencing Robert Schuman and Jean Monnet and the initial coal and steel community, so be it. I see the 3 E's: energy, electricity, and environment as potentially being the new drivers of a relationship that begins with the anchor countries, quickly extends to Egypt, which has increasingly been a partner in not just the East Med Gas Forum, but in each of the bilateral relationships that we can talk about. I see Jordan as a potential candidate. I hope one day that there will be a reliable, dependable, durable Palestinian state living alongside Israel in peace, in which case this would be an incentive. But what we're talking about is creating an alternative vision for the Eastern Med, which over time will seduce, politically and economically seduce, countries into rethinking their basic geopolitical assumptions, their basic relationships, and create an alternative. And by the way, I would add as a final note, Roland, that why shouldn't this begin to extend up through the Balkans, beginning with countries like Bulgaria, who can live consistently with their EU obligations, and at the same time can also contribute to this growing geopolitical zone of peace, prosperity, and interdependence, which at the end of the story is the name of the game. Positive, cooperative interdependence among nations, which allows cooperation to replace conflict.
Thank you so much, David. I mean, actually, this sounds so great. We could wrap it up right here. But
Put it to a vote.
no. Before we put it to a vote, let's hear the energy expert, Gina Cohen. Is everything as rosy as we've heard it?
Well, there are definitely opportunities, and there are, of course, many challenges. But I think that the main challenge is that we have to be realistic. And I think that we're not being realistic, I'm sorry to say. I don't think that things are as advanced as they seem to be. The forum in Egypt, the EMGF forum, there were 2 meetings. Each one was 6 months apart, and the next one was set for another 6 months. And I know that if I want to do something important, I don't say, well, hi guys, let's meet in 6 months. And Egypt has an interest in impeding progress of Turkey, because a few months ago, Israel was in advanced negotiations to sell its gas to Turkey, well, until a few months ago. And so it was a coup for the Egyptians that the Turks should not get the gas. Another aspect, and I'm sorry about the gentleman from the Ministry of, from the Embassy of Egypt, but another aspect about Egypt is that there were arbitrations between, legal arbitrations between Israel and Egypt, and the Egyptians were due to pay Israel $2.3 billion. And so a rapprochement between Israel and Egypt on the gas front and the signing of gas deals enabled Egypt to then have to not pay these sums, or to pay a much smaller amount. Even on the Cypriot deal, indeed, an exploitation agreement was signed a few weeks ago with the Aphrodite partners, which include Shell from America, from Israel, from England and Holland, and Noble from America, and the Israeli Delek Group. But, and this is a big but, the FID, which is the final investment decision, is only to be taken between 4 and 6 years' time. So again, this is a long lead time before anything happens. Turkey is a spoiler, indeed, and if anybody wants to build a pipeline between the Eastern Mediterranean and Europe, they can impede it, but they don't have so much power as one thinks, because even according to the laws of the sea, to the law of the sea of 1982, coastal countries only have the right to stop a pipeline being built for 2 years, and only based on environmental problems or safety routes. So if the Europeans as the buyers, or Israel and Cyprus as the sellers, wanted to enforce the pipeline, there would be a possibility to build a pipeline despite the opposition from Turkey. So there are other challenges, bigger powers in the region that are a challenge. And the first one that comes to mind is Russia, because Russia, as we heard, is supplying between 30 and 40% of European gas, of the 440 BCM that Europe consumes. And they have cheap gas, and they can always undermine the price. They can always undercut the price of Cypriot and Israeli gas, and that is up to the Europeans to decide. Do they want cheaper gas, or do they want security of supply and less dependence on Russian gas? Another main spoiler, in my view, is a country that probably will not come to your mind. Here is America. And why would it not come to your mind is because America is very supportive of the projects. They're supportive of the EMGF project in Egypt, and they send very high level of ministers or ambassadors to these forums, and they're very supportive of the EastMed pipeline. But this is really more lip service. And why is this lip service? Because they want to export their own gas. They want to export LNG to Europe. So the Europeans, again, have to decide, do they want to get American LNG? America currently is already producing 55 billion cubic meters of LNG a year. This comes from shale gas. It is more polluting. It has more leakage. And it is further away than our own gas is. Or do they want to have a pipeline built between the two countries, which is a much safer security of supply if you have a pipeline between A and B and getting East Mediterranean gas? And I'll just say now 2 more words, that if the Europeans want to get Eastern Mediterranean gas, they have to do more than speak. They have to pass certain kinds of regulations. For instance, the EIB that decided a few weeks ago that they're not going to invest anything more in gas after 2022 it's helping to foster Russian gas, because the Russian pipelines have already been built, and it is stopping new projects from being built. Other issues, I'll just give one other example. You have the need for unbundling. That means we do not agree that whoever owns the gas should also be building the pipeline. While Eastern Mediterranean gas may need stakeholders like Shell or Delek or Noble to be part of the pipeline project. So there are lots of things that have to be done, and one has to be realistic about what needs to be done and what should be done.
Thank you for these sobering comments. Now, before we open it up to the audience, I'd just like to turn to our 2 gentlemen on my right. Would you like to add something to Gina's words, or?
Referring to me?
Both.
Yeah, I do have some answers on what Gina has mentioned, which to a certain degree, she's very correct about some of the challenges. Let me start and say about the agreement, the exploitation licenses that were granted a couple of weeks ago. The companies, a couple of years back, came to us, and they said, and I'm talking about Shell, Noble, and Delek, an Israeli company, who are the licensees of the Aphrodite field. They came to us and they said, look, we cannot commercialize the gas in such low prices of oil. They were hovering between $50 and $60 at the time, probably at around the same now. And they said, look, you need to give us some comfort in the lower prices of oil. So this meant fundamentally that they wanted the government of Cyprus to assume some of the market risk. Something which, of course, is very common to the remaining contracts that we have signed now at EZ. It's just this particular one gave put all of the risk on the companies. So we said, fine, let's discuss about assuming some of the market risk. But what stops you from coming back to me in 6 months or in 1 year time, or indeed in 2 or 3 years time, once we have agreed, and say, I want more? And therefore, their argument is, and what we have agreed is that while we are taking a little bit of market risk, we could be making more if the price recovers, and they are taking the project risk. It means that if they don't proceed in certain milestones that we have agreed, appraisal, a FEED, front-end engineering and design, each of these projects is about 100 million, by the way, because the well will be a production well as well. And if they don't take FID as per their project plan, they could even lose the license. So they're very strict. So now here, if the companies are feeling optimistic enough or confident enough to take such risk, I'm fine with that. They will be doing the investment. The initial investment for the Aphrodite field is 3.5 billion. And that's excluding the pipeline, which is another billion to connect with ITCO. So if the companies who know their job best than anyone, right, are willing to take the risk and they're confident about it, then so be it. So we struck the deal. With regards to Turkey, Gina mentioned correctly that the Speran clause, a country cannot block it for more than 2 years. Yes, but if that assumes that that country respects the rule of law. Here we have gunboat diplomacy, from left and right? And it's in complete violation. The U.S., yes, the U.S. has its own interest. They want to sell LNG to Europe. But at the same time, we have been successful enough, especially in Cyprus during the third licensing round, and Egypt more recently, and I hope Israel very soon, to attract huge American interests in the region. So besides Noble, who had a footprint for many years now we have Exxon. And you know, when Exxon talks in the US, Washington listens, right? When super majors such as this. So aligning the interests doesn't mean only for the US to ship LNG to the European market, but it also means to making sure that their companies in our region also make money, which is very helpful. I'll stop here.
Excellent. Minister, thank you so much. So, before we take some questions, David, would you like to add a word, or?
The only word I would add is I think that what we're talking about poses enormous both opportunity but also challenge for the European Union. And among the early challenges is the Turkish challenge. And I don't know the extent to which we have the time to really go into it in depth, but I would only say that as I have followed the issues, the French response was a laudable response to the Turkish encroachments and threats in the exclusive economic zone. The question, though, is to the extent that what we're talking about is in the core interests of the European Union, what further action will be taken collectively by the European Union and by interested and affected member states of the European Union beyond what is currently the case. I mean, one can begin with a lofty headline, well, this is all the more reason why we have to solve the 1974 invasion and the consequence of a divided island. That's obviously easier said than done. But in the meantime, we have the daily provocations that have been coming from Turkey. I don't have to tell this group how complicated and complex are Europe's negotiations with Turkey and Turkey's capacity to respond on many levels that can be viewed as disruptive to Europe. But at the same time, avoiding this question or believing this question will solve itself or can be addressed with statements alone or statements plus bland actions, if I may put it that way, will not be sufficient. We can't avoid this central question.
Excellent basis for debate. Let's have a round of questions. Would you please show me your hand if you want to ask something or make a short comment. Please, sir, and please.
Obviously, pipelines have certain advantages in terms of security and probably cost. LNG has the advantage of being able to be shipped in multiple markets, which, given the politics of the region, gives you more flexibility. How do you determine balancing the flexibility with the security of the pipeline?
Anybody else?
Sir, a couple of questions. Yeah. Thank you very much. Minister, panel, professor from Liège University. The point is that what do you have as leverage and how could you deal with Turkey? We tried that since many years. It's useless. You talk about European Union. What the union? You talk about gas. You know that from Romania in 2 years' time, they will start to pump gas. Already they have 900 kilometers built as a gas pipeline. Then that will satisfy Austria and a part of Germany. Germany is importing a lot of gas from Russia. Hungary as well. Croatia, they will start very soon. Then the point is that all of you mentioned here is Turkey. What can we do with that problem? This is the turning point. Otherwise, everybody here in this room agree with that. And we agree to go further on. But who's the leader? In Japan, 100 people elect one, and they bend to that person until the mandate is out. Here, we have 100 people, and everybody's believing that he's a leader. He's challenging the other leader. That, let's take a direction.
Excellent description of European politics. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sir.
And very depressing.
Thank you. Naftogaz of Ukraine. May I ask you a question, please? Can you brief us on what is the status of the East-Med things between the four countries, especially benchmark timings, what are considered, and when we should expect, you see this start or at least the first stage to build up lay the pipeline. And one comment that is to challenge Madam Cohen's point that Russian gas is not cheap, believe me. And everybody knows that. Thank you.
Well, the cost of Russian gas comes in different forms. Let's put it that way. Anybody else? No. Good. Then
It's very cheap. It's very cheap to produce, so they can always undercut their price if they want to. Not to Ukraine. You're not buying any anymore. Yes. You're not buying any more Russian gas, so yeah.
Okay. You know, Naftogaz is a Ukrainian company. Just you know it, but maybe not everyone in the room. So, okay, right. Then we had some other questions like leverage on Turkey, unity in the European Union, the pipeline question, Minister.
So let me start with the question LNG versus pipeline, right? Certainly there are pros and cons for each of them. At the end of the day, the market is the one that's going to dictate which one will fly. What do I mean to say? For example, Shell came to us and they said, look, Shell, ITCO, they are the operators of the LNG plant in Egypt. They came to us and they said, look, I want to integrate the Cypriot Aphrodite gas, potentially in the future Israeli gas as well. I will want to integrate it in my portfolio of LNG. I'm one of the biggest, if not the biggest LNG carrier in the world, and I want to put that gas into my portfolio. And this is why, also very crucially, that we have secured a very, at least preliminary, not secured yet, a very competitive tolling fee on the LNG plant itself to make the project actually work. I'm not going to say the number because it's confidential, but very, very competitive, exactly because it's an existing infrastructure that has been amortized, right? So there is a very clear-cut solution which says, look, LNG goes to ITCO, cheap tolling fee, it will be shipped and it will be regasified into any of the regasification terminals in Europe or elsewhere in the world. Flexibility, as you said, very correctly. On the other hand, you have the East-Med pipeline, and I will answer the question of where it stands as well. We are currently at the front-end engineering and design study. That's about 100 million cost. We're not talking about cheap change, out of which 35 million are funded by the European Union from the Connecting Europe facility. That will show us how competitive it is. The consortium was in my office about a month ago, who's leading the project, and they said, we are ready to buy the gas from the field itself, from the fields itself. They even gave me a price, right? So, and of course, what we said, okay, let's wait until the next wave of our exploration program is finished, which will commence very soon. We'll see what kind of discoveries we have on the table, so we can see which solutions actually will work, right? And which solutions will be competitive. What I'm trying to say, at the end of the day, it's the market that's going to determine which is which. Today, there is very cheap LNG out there. The price is very competitive because of Russian gas, because of US gas, because of Australian gas as well is now in the market. And I will say something in support of Gina's argument. Here in Brussels, they say that Russia is running its economy on oil while it's running its foreign policy on gas. So what Gina said is very correct. At the same time, however, you have multiple portfolios of companies. There will be an ever-increasing demand for gas as we go towards a renewables future. And today at the Energy Council, we reaffirmed that gas will be considered the bridge fuel towards a renewables future because it's a much cleaner form of hydrocarbon than coal, lignite, or even heavy fuel.
Great. David, yeah, and yeah, well,
look, the EU, I have to say, over the past few, yes, Professor, over the past, since July and more recently now in November, has decided to take targeted measures against Turkish officials. So you could be looking very soon at sanctions on companies and individuals about the activities in the Eastern Med. Yes, the means that we have as Cyprus in our disposal are diplomatic, right, and legal. And we are going to exercise them to the fullest. We belong to a fantastic club called the EU with its challenges, yes, with its challenges, both economic but mostly political, because it still hasn't formed any political unit, it's more an economic bloc. But still, as a small country as Cyprus is, having that fora that we can go to and discuss the challenges that we face, and even take measures such as the ones that will be announced very soon, specific and targeted towards companies, counts for something.
Without American help, nothing can be done. They have many weapons in the pocket. For example, immigrants, 1.5 million over there. Watch out. When they come, it's a problem for Europe.
American help. That's for you, David.
But sir, before I try to answer, can you explain that last comment about the immigrants?
No, I said, without American...
No, I understand, but...
I said, without American
No,
help,
I heard the first part.
nothing can happen.
The second part about the 1.5 million.
Because Turkey has many weapons in the pocket.
Correct.
And for example, is immigrants.
Opening the doors to
Yeah,
immigrants.
okay. No, because the previous sentence was about the United States. I thought you were connecting the two, which no. I'm sorry. For those of you who are either German or Yiddish speakers, you'll understand the word chutzpah. It would be, for me, an act of chutzpah, of audaciousness, to try and offer a prescription for how to deal with Turkey here in Brussels, even on this august occasion. But I do agree very much with the point that you made in response to the minister, sir, and I was going to insert that myself. To me, this is precisely an example of where the US and Europe must cooperate deeply, cooperate trustingly, and I'm not sure in the current environment that is achievable. Perhaps it is, but there is still a question mark. But current environments are transient moments. Things change. Things change in different places, in mindsets and leadership. We'll see. But I completely agree with you that if we're going to make a dent in the Turkish question, there must be fuller, deeper cooperation between the United States and the European Union and the principal engines of the European Union, the key capitals. Number one. Number two, the United States itself, as has been said, has become a much more significant player in the Eastern Mediterranean project. This was not an obvious issue for the American leadership earlier on. They stayed back. They observed it. They weren't certain. When Secretary Pompeo went to Jerusalem to participate with the three leaders of Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, that became a statement of a new level of development, which I will tell you we are continuing to encourage in the United States. The more the United States has a stake in this project, the more the United States will understand the need to find solutions to the Turkish interference. And number three, again, as a general proposition, I know it doesn't satisfy the granular level, but bullies will never understand weakness. So I begin in trying to formulate a policy planning approach by saying that signs of weakness, whether by the United States or Europe, signs of hesitation, signs of internal contradiction, Should we, playing out, only play into the hands of the regional bully? In this case, he who occupies the palace in Ankara. So as a first step, what France did with its ships is something that every nation should be doing, not just applauding the French from afar, saying bravo, but participating, showing collective strength and unity across Europe and across the Atlantic in confronting the Turkish challenges.
Indeed, the strength and unity that Europe had in the 1950s in putting on track the process of European integration based on coal and steel, which was the cutting edge technologies of the day. And I think the idea that you, David, voiced in the beginning, that let's make energy the catalyst of a comparable peace project and stability project in the Eastern Mediterranean, I think, is an excellent note on which to finish. But before we get something to eat, John Shapiro, the chair of the Transatlantic Institute, will have the time to make some concluding remarks. I already thank you very much. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I know that I stand before you, or between dinner and reception and this event. So let me be brief. My name is John Shapiro. I'm the past president of the American Jewish Committee. So I reported to David for many years, and I continue to do so as the current chair of the AJC Transatlantic Institute. I have the great honor to thank our keynote speaker, Minister Lakkotrypis, and also David Harris, CIO, Gina Cohen, and our moderator, Roland Freudenstein, for this tremendously interesting discussion. As we have heard, the opportunities for greater European energy security through cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean are real and they're promising. Thankfully, this vital project also has strong bipartisan support in the U.S. The Eastern Mediterranean Security and Energy Partnership Act, which already passed through the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, will, among other steps, lift the arms embargo on Cyprus and authorize the establishment of a U.S. Eastern Mediterranean Energy Center. This center will facilitate energy cooperation between the U.S., Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. It will reinforce military assistance to Greece and also echo recently introduced restrictions on F-35 shipments to Turkey, assuming that Turkey continues to plan to purchase the S-400 from Russia. This is why this act is an AJC policy priority, which we're supporting together with our friends from the Hellenic American Leadership Council. As sister democracies in a turbulent region, the thriving trilateral relationship between Cyprus, Greece, and Israel is in and of itself an exciting possibility full of opportunities. Hopefully, the effort may also serve as a catalyst for even deeper ties within the region between Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. With that, I now have the pleasure to invite you to enjoy a small reception. Thank you for being with us tonight. Reception. You know, I'm a stock market guy, and I think more short-term than these people